Welcome to the program, everyone. And really pleased today to be joined by Mr. Kent Eimbrodt, who's the General Manager for Bullivants, which is a subsidiary of Wesfarmers. And Kent's got a really interesting career as Mr. Fix-It for sales teams. And we want to get into what we do when we come into a new sales team, some of the do's and don'ts, and the sort of things, actions we can take to turn around underperforming sales teams. So Kent, welcome to the program. Really looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the very kind intro. I don't know about Mr. Fix-It, but yes, I've certainly been in a number of sales organisations that have been in a lot of trouble and helped steer them to a greater path.
I think the title's well deserved. I'm sure you've got the scars to prove it. So do you want to just give everyone just a little bit on your background and how you got here?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. A career in sales for many years, having come up through the ranks of small to medium enterprises in Australia, running national sales organisations, and then being offered an opportunity to found a subsidiary for a European equipment manufacturer in Australia, and start that business up from the ground, recruit a sales team and get going. A little bit of background on that story was that they had been trading in Australia through an agency for 20 years, had never sold more than $1 million in those days. They were trading in US dollars. And year three of our startup for them in Australia, we had 10 million euros in revenue.
Wow, that's impressive.
Just the question of, we really understood the market. We really understood what the customers were wanting and needing, and we were able to take that off to Europe, to the team over there, and articulate it in a way that they could understand it and get behind it with the product family that was fit for the market. So I'm pretty passionate about this whole voice of the customer piece.
Right. So interesting point you make there. So it wasn't just a matter of improving things on the ground here and the action you took here. A lot of the success was your ability to go back into the headquarters and get the proper support, whether that's investment or some product or, some way of coming to market that was suited to the local market.
Yeah, exactly. Just being able to articulate the nuances perhaps in the market that were very different to the cultures that they were used to dealing with in Europe, and being able to get them to understand the rationale of why we wanted to go down a particular path, whether that was with a product or an approach to the market, and to get their support and buy-in. So that point about being able to understand the customer need in spades, and then being able to articulate that back up to gain support has been it's paramount. It really is paramount when you have a foreign parent in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of business was that?
That was a business that produced power sources for heavy welding and industrial welding applications.
Oh, okay.
And that was a market that I was in at the time. Based off the back of what we were able to achieve in Australia, I then got asked by that particular company whether I had an interest to actually relocate myself up to Finland. It was a Finnish company. And help them with the global organisation. And I got offered the role of global sales director. I packed up my family, moved to Finland, and then took the same challenge on a global scale. We went down the path of doing many things the same, of course, always reflecting on the sales team, where we were, strengths, weaknesses, all that good stuff. But then in each market, making sure we were able to really understand the intimate need of the customer, and then how could we articulate that back so that we could build the right program to support it.
So Kent, step me through that process. Like, what do you do when you come into a team? Okay, they're only running at $1 million a year. They've no doubt tried a lot of different things, and haven't been able to crack the code. What's your approach to coming into a situation? Like, do you see things immediately that need to be changed, or do you do some research, or how do you go about
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, absolutely. With experience, of course, you see things immediately that you feel you should change. But I guess the learning has been to stop, take a breath, listen, really listen to the team. And in that case, in Europe, I worked for two different organizations in Europe. One of the things we did was, an analysis of the team. So to, sort of, we used like disc profile or strengths finder. I'm a bit of a fan of strengths finder to understand, because each individual will be different and need to know, what are we working with, what have we got in our hands, and how could we build the support. So there's like two core themes for me. There's a theme on the team and about the team and what makes them tick and how they gel together. And there's a big theme in the market about the customer.
Okay.
And the customer needs. So for me, you have these two things to do concurrently. But the first and foremost, you start with the team, listening to the team, getting buy-in, understanding where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. I like what you're talking about there, because I've often found the answers are often inside the team.
Yep.
The answer, because they're the ones
Absolutely.
dealing with customers every day. They're the ones trying to sell the product, and they know which product works, which one doesn't. They know about the competition they're facing. There's actually a lot of gold in there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And that's the reality of it. Over my career, I've gone from industry to industry. So I'm not the carrier of all of the knowledge about how does that industry or market work. And the team, they've been doing it for years, and they know what they know. Those gems, those absolute pearls of wisdom, they're all there. It's a question of teasing them out, framing them, playing them back. So this piece about gather everything that you can from the team, and then you need to sense check what they've said against the market. And I think that's the difference that I've seen in my career going around the world, is absolutely get the team, do all the work with the team, but then how do I check that? How do I check that against what the market wants? And because they've been doing that for so many years, and they've got all their battle scars from their exposure in their market, they have a frame of mind or a way to think about the work and the approach to the work. And sometimes there's, things as simple as sort of not seeing the forest for the trees.
Sure.
And so we've got to help develop the team, and taking this what the team said and taking it out to the market and testing that on the market can bring back some insights that you would never have thought of. And that's happened a number of times for me.
Yeah, no, that's good. Because the team, you might have some team members been there 5 years, 10 years longer. They've got their set of customers, they've got their way of thinking, and they might have not have had a lot of outside influence or developed very much, or they might be a bit fixed in their ideas. So you can definitely run into that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Look, if I roll this forward and come into the present role that I've got, working in Bullivants, and I'm 3.5 years in now. This was a business that was struggling, absolutely struggling, and came in with the same approach. Bullivants is a business that sells chains and hooks and slings. We're in the business of lifting, helping people lift heavy things. And the easiest way to imagine that is, if there's a crane hook and something big and heavy to be picked up, well, between the hook and whatever the thing is, we create that environment. We work with our customers to understand how to connect these two things together and how to lift them safely. So we know what we do. We keep people safe. We just happen to sell hooks and chain along the way. The product. So we've spent a lot of time understanding that. But when I came into Bullivants, knew nothing about the industry. The same thing. Got the sales team together from around the country. we sat, we talked, we did a SWOT analysis, all of the basic things that you would normally do. And a lot of good information came out of that. And then I ran a process about trying to understand what was the value proposition we've got. So I hear you, I hear what you're saying about the market and what the customers want and what we need to do. And like, you know, if I asked 30 people what was the value prop, I got 30 variances on a theme.
Right.
So I didn't get 2 that were the same. So
well, there's an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an opportunity, and it's typical with a business like this. We have 20 locations, so we're dispersed around the country. We've got small teams of people. We have 275 people in the company currently, across 20 plus locations. So no big one group anywhere. So we have all these different themes. So I used a tool from Alex Osterwalder, the value proposition canvas, and I'm a bit of a fan of his business model canvas and his value proposition canvas. And it literally looks at what are the jobs that we do, what do we see that we have as gain creators, and what do we think we have that actually might cause a customer some pain. And so you go through that cathartic exercise, map all that out, and then you do the same thing from the customer's point of view. What are they looking for? What do we think the gains the customers are looking for? What do we think the pains are? And then you just align everything up and work through. And it's not a bad tool. I haven't found one better for helping a team work through and come.
Okay, we'll look that up, and I'll link to that in the notes here as well, so everyone can check it out.
Yeah. So it's a great tool. So we did all that, and in all of that conversation in my early days in this particular, the business performance, it had been in decline for a number of years, and margins had gone from sort of circa 40 to the high 20s. And the business was really distressed. And price, all I could hear from the team was price. We need better prices. We need lower prices. Price. That was the theme. Everything was price. So, okay, took all that on board. And then I was sort of looked at the team and said, well, where's the customer data? What do we have from the customers? Our surveys, feedback, whatever.
Yep.
And we went back 8 years and we could find nothing formal done. I gave up looking at after 8 years because it would have been useless. So there was no organized no organized or gathered feedback in a structured way from the customers. So we just pulled together a really simple net promoter score to start off with, because it was low cost and we could do it easily. The single question on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you, how likely are you to recommend Bullivants to a friend or a colleague? And we asked at the same time, we asked a couple of other questions in there as well. We simply went through no matter what the rating you give us, what would we need to do for a higher rating, just to see if we could get some insight from the market. We asked a question like, what do we do really well? Open-ended question. What do we do really well?
Yeah.
And then based on the input from the value proposition canvas that the team had come, we had these items that the team believed were most important to the customers, and they were around the pain side for the customer, that they didn't want to waste time, and they definitely didn't want to be rectifying things. Yet they didn't want to have sites or jobs shut down, because when lifting and rigging goes wrong, a site gets shut or a job gets shut. They definitely didn't want to lose their company reputation if something went wrong. They couldn't afford to have things performed in an unsafe way. Definitely no physical harm, and cost overruns. So we had these 6 things, and so we put them into a question that says, based on these difficulties, can you rank them to the customers? Can you rank them most important to least important? And then we asked one more question. So we only had 5 questions. We asked one more question that was like, could you rank these benefits that you wish to achieve with when you're dealing with us in order of importance? Value for money, meet a job deadline, zero harm, and don't exceed the budget. And so we got the survey back, and what was in really powerful in getting the survey back from the customer was, one, that we got a lot of free written, like, open comments, masses of them, which was there was a number one signal for me. Customers had commitment and buy-in to the company.
Yeah, they had some engagement. That's a good sign. Yeah, they were rooting for you guys.
Yeah, they really wanted to articulate with us and spend time trying to improve us by giving us feedback. So that was a really, really big thing. But in all the noise in those last two questions about what are your priorities and rank them in an order of importance, what came back was the number one thing the customers said that they want to avoid or they want to gain was that they wanted to avoid physical harm. And the number one gain they wanted was to deliver zero harm. So don't hurt anybody. So it was the number one thing. The second thing was that they didn't want to have a loss of company reputation. Third was can't shut a site or a job down. The fourth thing was a delay, and then like the last thing was like a cost overrun. So what wasn't being said there, which was the critical learning for me in this business, what wasn't being said there was price is an issue. So price was not an issue.
Sure.
And here we were in a price race to zero with just, margins being just eroded away at a phenomenal rate. And it was like, okay, now we have to make a complete reset.
Yeah.
Because the team believes the way to go forward and the only tool that they had to fight in the market was price. When in fact, the customers were saying the complete opposite.
Yeah. And look, I think this is a little bit common, isn't it? That it's, if we're not doing well, we can blame price.
Yep.
Right. It can be a bit of a default for an underperforming team. Blame price, blame the product, blame something else, right? Like, what was your analysis of why they were gravitating to price? Why was the team doing that?
Yeah, so they knew that the business wasn't performing well, and there was an element of we've just got to get sales. So we've just got to try and hit a number. So that was one of the elements. The second one was they clearly didn't understand the real need of the market. They'd lost their way, because the value prop wasn't there, and they were looking at the wrong things. And then a third finding, which came a little bit after this, but I can jump to it now, was that they were. I need to be careful of how I articulate this. They were
protect the innocent.
Yes, they were doing more farming than business development.
Yeah. Okay.
So existing accounts, working hard to hold on to the existing accounts, and very little new business development was being done.
Right.
And so what was happening? One of the deeper findings we got when we put a whole project into pricing after this, and what we found in pricing was one of the reasons that the prices were as low as they were the team was just allowing the last price paid to keep coming forward on the new orders. And when we unraveled it, what we had found was that because we were doing consistent business with a consistent group of customers over many years, we were not passing price increases on. We weren't putting price increases into the market. And that's a critical thing for any sales team, is to be confident and articulate and comfortable at actually putting price increase into the market.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you do it every month or whatever, but at least once a year there should be something. There I found, Steve, in the industrial B2B space in Australia, the small to mediums can be really weak at that.
Sure. Yeah, and big customers put a lot of pressure back on you, right? They say, "Hey, we've got a goal of keeping costs flat or reducing costs year to year," right? So it's not a trivial exercise to go and get cost increases from customers. I've had to go and do it many times
Yeah.
and get my teams on board. It's a significant exercise, and if they're not getting the strong leadership, if they're not strong on the value prop, if they don't feel secure about how strong they are with the customer relationship, then yeah, they're going to shy away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this piece around price increase, the team faces typically today, they face professional purchasing officers that are trained in negotiation.
Yeah.
And we might have some professional salespeople, we might have some very technical salespeople that have come through that have never done a negotiation course or training in their life.
Sure.
So they haven't been armed with it. So the team today is quite good. We've come a long way, but it's about once again painting the picture, getting the backing, and telling the story. Today we're able to bring 5 or 6 of the global indices forward in a pricing conversation, show what's happening with the cost of metals, cost of fuel, cost of energy. We've created a complete environment about it. So, I mean, to think through price and price strategy is, it should be top and front of mind for the sales leaders.
Yes.
About how am I going to protect my margin? How are we going to go forward and put price increase to the market at least once a year?
Yeah. It can't be a surprise to the customer. It's got to be like a part of how you go to market and part of the business, part of the ongoing conversation. You talk about, here's our pricing. This is locked in for the next year. We have a process of reviewing it every year. So yeah, the customers sort of warmed up, to the idea, right? So it's still going to be a battle.
Yes.
Even lining all your ducks up, it's still going to be a battle. But
correct.
Yeah.
But Steve, the tip is the first time's the hardest. The first time when you go with the team members and you go out and there hasn't been a price increase I'm in the middle of one now where that particular national client of ours hasn't had an increase in 7 years.
Right.
So
wow.
we've got a huge lift to make. So we'd like to get a 15% price increase, but we'll punch high fives if we get away with a 2.5.
Yes. Okay.
So that first meeting, that's really difficult. That's really hard to have. But once you go through the process, you get it over the line, you get it embedded, and you come back a year later. Once there's a routine to it, and there's some experience, and you support the team well with the right framework, give them the tools. They've got to have tools. They just can't go out and just say, "Here's an Excel." Here's
absolutely no. They can't.
You've got to be able to tell the whole story about all of the drivers. And as I said, we used 80% of the product, 75 to 80% of the product we sell is based out of metal. The other is in synthetics, and so we link all the indices we can up to show the rationale behind price increases, and that just creating that framework and putting that data and those tables together and putting it into a package that a salesperson can articulate and supported by their manager normally goes quite well.
Yeah, and I've seen it work well as well. I did a lot of work with an insurance company in getting price increases through brokers, and they're talking about some pretty serious price increases year to year. They can vary like 20 or 30%. Sometimes the premiums can go up. And a lot of the salespeople are cautious about going to the brokers with that news. But we put together a whole messaging that would help the brokers to sell that to their customers as well. Right. And so I'd say similar with your accounts, how can they pass those costs on to their clients or justify that in their own company to cover that price increase. So you've got to think about, how can you mitigate that cost for the customer as well?
What's equally important, Stephen, we've got to call out here is the indices, for example, that we use in our world at the moment are not the only answer. If we go back to what the market told us in this currently, they told us that zero harm was important. We can't hurt anybody. So then we've had to look at our processes and everything that we do when we're on site or giving advice, and how could we record that and demonstrate a value for it, even if it was only a demonstrated value on paper or at a quarterly review with a client, so that they could understand the additional value that they were getting from us that didn't necessarily appear on an invoice. And so we've become good. We're not great yet. We've become good. We're better at capturing those touch points with the customer when we're knee deep in giving advice or support around the job that they're doing. And I think that little gem there of being able to look at your sales process, look at when your team is in front of the customer and how they're helping them solve the problem. If the solving the problem, the end is selling a product, well, that's okay. But all that work to get there, how could you capture and articulate a value for that and be able to put it on the table and go, in addition to all the indices, we've done all this extra stuff for you.
Yes.
All these different events, all these particular projects we've contributed in, delivered all this value and put a value to it. I mean, if you put a value to it, it's pretty hard for someone to say that that's not worth that.
Right.
It is actually, hard for. So we've been learning there. We don't have it down pat yet. We've got a long way to go, but we're building that. So that piece about just thinking when the team's in front of the customer, helping solve problems or develop their business, finding ways to save them money. How can I record that and then articulate it back? And with the bigger accounts, we're big fans of the quarterly business review, which is a time to dedicated time.
So it's a more holistic view of the business and the account, what you're doing for them. Right. Yeah. You don't want to just have discussions every year just around the pricing, right? It's got to be about all the service levels and the problem, the safety record, maybe. Yeah. There'd be a lot of things you could bring in here.
Yes.
And the extra value you're putting into the product or the service, which no doubt you're trying to do. Very good.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's a part of the journey we're on here. We were able to get this really deep insight from the customers that the number one thing was we don't want to hurt anybody. And based on that zero harm piece, when we articulated that back to the team, they're like, well, we know that, but they actually couldn't find a way immediately to put a value on it or how they could articulate. So we went down a process of really digging into the value proposition that led us onto developing, the why bull of it. It's a little bit out of Simon Sinek's why philosophy.
Yep.
And we've been doing that with the team, and we understand. And I think this point today, the team really knows that what we do is keep people safe. In this business, we keep people safe.
Okay.
We just happen to sell books and chains and wire ropes and synthetic slings and rapid tie downs along the way. And that having the conversations, the sales conversations, articulated in that manner has been very powerful. And we're a big organisation. We're never going to be the lowest cost provider in town.
Yeah.
We'll never be the lowest priced. That just won't happen. So we need to be good at being able to demonstrate all of the value we bring to the table for the customers. And the best way I've found to be able to articulate that is to constantly be checking with the customers and asking the questions about to understand what are they really looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken, I think that's great. It's very profound, isn't it? A lot of companies still focused on selling their product or the features and benefits of their product. But, we need to turn that around. What problem are we solving? What's the real, business benefit for the customer that they get from working with us? And like you say, you guys, offering a safety, right? Yep. Safety. And no doubt you're helping them deliver their projects on time and not have delays or have the factory stopped and things like that. You actually supplying them cables and a few services as well, which I'm sure are great products, but customers don't care about that. They care about those outcomes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So the point that as we worked through that and developed our processes around that, we took control of the pricing. We found in the business that I'm in currently that pricing was being controlled out in the branches, and that is a flaw for me. That's a flaw. Pricing framework should be controlled centrally, and so we pulled all that back internally, and created, new trade prices for everything. Gave the team discounts that they could work with, rather than they were working with a cost up mentality, rather than understanding a market price.
Sure.
And so that was an interesting piece in the business. We had to set market price, and when I was talking with a couple of the team members about, because we had no market prices for items in our system,
Right.
Which was interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Pricing was really interesting. You had no market prices in there, so they were looking for.
Pricing is a whole science, right? And there's a lot of benefit from centrally looking at or giving intelligence, because each individual person in a branch, for them to be expert on pricing and understand all the competitors and the different configurations and so forth, it's just not going to be as good as someone that's got visibility on 30 salespeople across the business and comparing all the deals, the wins, the losses, and all of that. Yeah. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. No. In that, and to prove that to the team that we have, we just ran a pricing exercise, effectively a secret shopper with a few items around the 20 branches, and for the same items and the same quantity of items in a given week, we got 20 different prices on the branches, and that was that. And for all the reasons that they had, and we knew then that was broken, and we needed to take that, pull that back.
Yeah, there needs to be some integrity, doesn't there?
Yeah, that's absolutely. And why would we get more for an item in Queensland and less in New South Wales?
Sure.
So we dealt that, but we fixed that. We put some aspiration on. I called them aspirational. The team didn't know, when we came in an industry that wasn't used to having trade prices. What should we put into the system? And I said, well, just put aspirational prices in, and let's start with that. Put a discount structure for it. We did that, and then we coached the team through that process. It took 4 or 5 months, but what happened was, once they understood the value proposition, they understood the drivers to price, and were having the right kind of conversations. Although it was challenging, price wasn't so much of an issue. And we saw in the first 6 months of the change that the margin, the trading margin, climb 5,000 basis points, 5 percentage points. And that put the business back on the right feet to be properly profitable.
Amazing.
And going forward. And we've gone, we have 9,000 basis points now, increase from 3 years ago.
Wow. That's big leverage on your P&L.
It is, it's huge, and the team's in a different space today and has a different confidence.
Yeah. All right, Kent, we're sort of coming up to the end here. So you have some final thoughts. We covered a lot of ground there.
Steve.
Oh, sorry, Kent. Hello. Have you got me?
I can hear now. Yeah.
Okay, good. So Kent, we've covered a lot of ground there, and I really like the approach and the structure. So you've got the part where you listen to the team, you're assessing the team, looking at what you've got there, but then you're cross-checking that with the market and getting the voice of the customer in driving the strategy, working with the headquarters. There's quite a few components there to be. To turn a business around and make it successful. And, you've obviously done that several times. So do you have some final thoughts for us before we wrap up?
Yeah, final thoughts would be, don't underestimate the voice of the customer, and look for what they're not telling you. That for me is, you'll get feedback but then step back from it and look at it and sort of look for what might not being said here, or what may not be being said. And that for me was this thing about price in this current one. Take the team on the journey. We need to understand their strengths, their weaknesses, work with that, and sort of align the team, get the value prop right, and just keep feeding the voice of the customer in. In my world, I can never have enough of it. It's got to keep coming.
Well, it seems like it's really been working for you, and I think a lot of great advice for sales leaders and general managers coming into roles where they're expected to turn a business around. You could get hold of that voice of the customer. Take a little bit of time to study the situation. Don't knee jerk. With your decisions. And so I think some really great advice for us there, Kent. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Steve. My pleasure.
And thanks everyone for listening and watching. Look forward to engaging with you more. Bye for now.